Alright guys, so in this part of the video, we are going to start looking at our example program. So before we start working on that, I want to stress something. This is not the program you'll be creating. This is not the program you'll be submitting for your AP Create task. This is only a program that should be an example. So while I go through the program with you, I'm going to be explaining to you how the program meets the requirements for the Create task. And then from there, you can use that as an idea while you're thinking about your programs. So again, this is not the program you'll be submitting. I'm just giving you an example program that meets the requirements. Alright, so let's take a look at our example program. So the name of our program is Password Manager. And the intro says that our friends are having trouble coming up with secure passwords and remembering the passwords that they create. So we need to create a program that will help them create strong passwords and keep track of those passwords. So our program should give them the option to 1. Create a password, store passwords, check passwords, and when our program runs initially, it should show the message, "Welcome to Password Manager," and then give them the options that they have available in our program. So right away we see a few features standing out, but let's take a look at the requirements before we talk about the different features our programs will have. Alright, so we already know what our program should display when it runs. We'll see the message, "Welcome to Password Manager. What would you like to do?" And then we'll give them the 3 options, create, store, and check. Now, the requirements for our program state that if the user types create, our program should ask them what they're creating a password for. So that's basically the platform. Like, is it password for Twitter, Netflix, HBO, whatever it is. And then after we find out what the password is for, we should ask them a few questions about the password. Like, how many uppercase letters do they need in the password, how many lowercase letters, how many numbers, and how many special characters. And finally, we should take that information and create a password that meets that requirement. So that first block of requirements is a conditional block, right? And that's the condition for if the user types create. The next block is the condition for if the user types store. And when that happens, we should ask them what the password they're storing is for. That's similar to the first block in the create. So we're just asking them, is it for Twitter, TikTok, whatever it is that they're storing the password for. And then the next thing we should do is store the password by asking them for the password, and then finally storing the password. And right here, we should be thinking about how we want to store our password, right? So we have a platform and a password, so we should need to think of a way to store those things efficiently, and we'll get to that in a second. And the last conditional block is for check. So this is for if the user has already given us their password and they want to see what that password is. So if the user types check, we should ask them what the password is for, and then we will check our storage and return the password that they have stored. Alright, so the first thing we'll tackle in our program is the welcome message. So in the welcome message, we greet them by saying, "Welcome to Password Manager," and we ask them what they would like to do. Our program gives them 3 main options. They can type create to create and store a new password, store to store an existing password, or check to check a store password. So there are 3 main things happening in this code. 1, we have a variable called user choice. And the reason we have this variable is because we're using the input function, and the input function allows us to take data into our program, but we need to store it somewhere, and that is where our variable called user choice comes into play. And then at the very end of our code, if you notice, we have .lower. So that takes anything that the user types in and makes it lowercase for our conditional statement. So I'll show you our conditional statement, or the skeleton of our conditional statement, and then I'll explain to you why we need the .lower function. Alright, so here we have the skeleton of our conditional statement. We have the first condition for if the user types in create in line 3. We have the second condition for if the user types in store in line 5. We have the third condition for if the user types in check in line 7. And then in line 9, we have our final condition for anything else. So this isn't finished, but we have the general outline. And if you notice in lines 3, 5, and 7, our conditions are checking for lowercase words. So the create is lowercase, the store is lowercase, and the check is lowercase. So we use the .lower function. We use this .lower function to make sure that whatever they type in, we make it lowercase, because if they type in create with uppercase C, it won't match, and then that condition won't get triggered. And if they type in store with uppercase S, it won't match, and then that condition won't get triggered. So we make sure we make everything lowercase so that if they type in store, create, or check, we get the conditions being triggered. Alright guys, so to wrap up our video, I'm going to show you the basic structure of our conditional statement, and I'll also show you why we need the .lower function, this one right here, why we need that .lower function. I'll show you a few runs with the .lower function still in our program, and then I'll remove it and show you what happens when we remove the .lower and what we lose without that function. Alright, so the first thing I'll do is show you an example of what would happen if the user typed in create. So imagine I'm the user and I type in create, but it's all uppercase, right? The .lower function will take this and make it lowercase so that it can match this condition. Because if you notice, the string right here is a lowercase create, and the .lower function makes sure that it matches. So what happens when I hit enter? So it matched this condition and it printed this message. So let's see what happens when I type create another way. I'm going to type create with the uppercase C, lowercase r. So you would imagine, so as you can see, this that I just typed is clearly different from this right here. So let's see if we still get a condition that's being matched. When I hit enter, it still makes everything lowercase in the create, and it triggers this condition and it outputs that message. So that is with the .lower. Now let's see what happens when I remove .lower. So .lower has been removed from our program. Now I'm going to run it, and I'm going to type create in all uppercase. So you and I know that this uppercase create is essentially the same word as the lowercase create. But look what happens when I hit enter. Because it's uppercase, it doesn't match the lowercase create string, and so it fails that condition and it gets triggered here in the else condition. So that is what the .lower does. It allows us to make sure that no matter how the user types in create, if it's create, then it'll trigger the right condition. So .lower helps our program catch user errors. Alright, so before we move on to the next section, this is the code that you should currently have.